What's up everybody and welcome to Sunnyside TV, and today we're going to take a look at a Knight's Quest. And rarely does a game do a 360 on my expectations, but this one did. But before I go any further, if you guys end up liking this review, please consider hitting that like button and sub to the channel for more game reviews and gameplay videos. But without further ado, let's take a look at why A Knight's Tale might be a surprise hit of the year. The story here starts off simple. You're rusty and you're out exploring when you accidentally set off this purple crystal that floats in the sky, which will bring impending doom to the world. Then the mayor sets you on a task to bring back the legendary spirit knights to combat this crystal. Only when you do the said task, you end up collecting the knights' weapons and undertake the task yourself. The game story is pretty much not unique or all that worth caring about, but its humor is hilarious and the game never takes itself serious, which I liked. The game is just littered with funny quips and laugh out loud moments, and I love that aspect. Now, A Knight's Quest is a game that is heavily inspired by Zelda with some heavy platforming thrown in. I wouldn't really compare it to Breath of the Wild, but more along the lines of Ocarina of Time. It's a true adventure with a vast world to explore, and I do mean vast. You have a main mission to retrieve these weapons and save the world, but you don't have to follow that path if you don't want. The game is just littered with tons of side quests and mini games in the form of obstacle courses in every single zone. To top it off, there are secret areas and items to collect in pretty much every nook and cranny. The game is just as much about exploration as it is about saving the world. Now, there is no real progression like you would have with an RPG with A Knight's Quest. True to a Zelda-like game, really the only way you're progressing is collecting and wielding the Spirit Knight's weapons. There is 3 different types, starting with the wind, sword, and board combo that lets you shoot a bolt of wind from ranged. Then you have the dual knuckle fire fist that shoots a fireball from ranged as well. And last but not least, we have the ice hammer that shoots an icicle from range. In order to collect each one of these weapons, you have to go through the story and through the dungeons. Now, these dungeons are what you would expect if you've ever played a Zelda-like game. There is a series of puzzles room by room and enemies to fight, and you're navigating all these until you get to the end and face the boss. Now, the boss fights were actually my most fun time with the combat in this game, as combat is easily the weakest part of this, and I'll explain that a bit more in a second. But the bosses were actually extremely easy until I hit that 3rd ice boss who finally presented a challenge. All in all though, the enemies don't present much of a challenge really until the later stages of the game. Now, combat has no weight to it. There is no feedback when you swing your weapon and you hit something. This is really felt the most within the first 10 hours of the game, when you start off with not much and you're barely getting enough weapons to make the combat a little bit more in depth. As you progress further, the combat does start to ramp up in difficulty, with needing to counter some enemies using specific abilities like parrying, but it takes time for the combat to really show some teeth. Now, outside of just the weapons' abilities to do magic with fire, wind, and ice, you have the ability to block with your bumper button, and then the ability to parry, which will then stun the enemy and give you a boost to your weapon, and even add some extra combo attacks to the end. It's also the only way you can counter certain enemies the further you get in. There's also comes a time when you have to use a specific elemental ability to be able to do damage to certain types of enemies. So it takes a while before the combat in this game really starts to be a bit more entertaining. But for me, this was easily the biggest problem with the game. The combat doesn't really get difficult and interesting until later in the game. As for puzzles, these start off super basic in the game. You push a couple blocks here, you move things in certain places, and then the way opens forward. But wow, this can get pretty difficult the further you get in the game, and this will really fully depend on your problem solving on a personal level, as I played side by side with a streamer who was able to get some of his puzzles way faster, but then he would got stuck on one for almost 2 hours plus. There was times I would get stuck myself for an hour. Puzzles in this game are well done, and they really make you sit there and think and plan out your moves. I usually hate puzzles, and I did get frustrated at times when I would complete some of these, and I felt a sense of relief at times, just because with there being no guides, you almost have to wonder if you're going to be stuck in this spot forever. For me, this gets a plus all around, and I think puzzles, if you don't cheat yourself, it will be fun, but be prepared to not have your hand held here. But a huge part of Knight's Quest is not just the puzzles or the combat, but the platforming. This is actually a really big part of the game, and it almost feels like the combat and puzzles is about 60% of the game, while the other 40% is platforming. There is a ton of platforming here, and honestly, this is also well done. I really enjoyed these, and they were definitely challenging, but they never felt too frustrating like I did with the puzzles. But this isn't a pushover part of the game here either. I definitely fell a lot and I died a decent amount, and these definitely test your sense of timing and judgment, but overall for me this was another big positive here and I enjoyed this all around. As for the negatives with a Knight's Quest, unfortunately there is a decent amount here. First, the game is littered with bugs, and I'm not surprised as the sheer scope of how big this game is pretty ambitious. I found a lot of bugs that got my character stuck. I got dealt a handful of crashes in my playthrough. Unfortunately, the way the game works with the saves is another negative. There is no way to save the game. It auto saves for you, but mostly only when you zone in into a new area. So if you complete a huge area but you don't hit a new zone and you end up dying, you're going to have to start all over. Not only that, but there seems to be a massive bug that resets your progress in a dungeon when you rezone. So me being afraid of a crash, I would leave a dungeon in hopes of saving it, so if I die or crash I don't have to start over, and then when I would rezone I would have to restart the dungeon anyways. There is also a fast travel issue because almost going towards the end of the game I never got to unlock fast travel at any point, and I'm not sure if this was working properly, so I did have to run back and forth in this huge world. So not sure if this was intended or not, but it was fun having to backtrack for almost 10 to 15 minutes to get back into town. So there's definitely a lot of kinks for them to flesh out, but in the end of the day none of this was really game breaking, though at times definitely frustrating. But all in all, there is a vast world to explore here. The world is filled with creatures and people with quirky personalities. You could spend dozens upon dozens of hours just exploring and not even bother with the main quest if that's what your heart desires. I think this game is an adventurer's dream, and just the sheer scope of how many secrets and areas there are to find. I doubt you'll get bored here, and while the combat isn't a strength, it really starts to shine towards the end game and really starts to challenge you. The story here isn't much to really get excited about, but the dialogue keeps it funny and interesting. The colorful cartoony graphics also fit really well with the world and its crazy characters. The music can get a little repetitive but does a good job of filling in the moment to moment. The boss battles get that edgy danger music, and exploring gets that colorful Zelda-like music I'm accustomed to. My final score for A Knight's Quest is a solid 8 out of 10. I think the amount of content in this game, even if you're not much of an explorer, is pretty big. This was an ambitious title mixed with what I feel is pretty damn good value at 25 USD. You are getting 100% your money's worth here. It will take you a while just to beat the main story, as I got towards the end in 15 plus hours, but that was me skipping almost every side quest, and even then I hadn't done the last dungeon or killed the final boss. Pick this one up now if you have any interest in it, and if you ever catch this on sale, this game is going to be a 100% steal. But alright guys, if you've enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that like button. Sub to the channel if you're brand new and you're looking for more game reviews and gameplay videos, and hit that notification bell as well to know when a new video is going to come up. Also, consider following me on Twitch as I stream every single Friday. You guys can hop in and ask me anything about anything. But I am Sunny, and as always, I hope you all have a sunny day.